Well, hello. Last call here. We're doing it again. Place for answers. Not all the answers. Surprised? Today I'm going to be dealing with, I'm going to kind of address this a little differently than I normally do. The last couple videos that I did, I was kind of stiff and didactic, and it's just not me. I I've seen so much in this life that the way I deal with life is with some humor. So I may cut up a little bit, and it'll be corny, but just roll your eyes and continue, because this is some good stuff here. Now, the first thing I want to address today, this clip that I have up, I need to do a bit of an apologetic, if you know what that means. For those who don't, it's an answer for an explanation of what's really going on. That's a very simple way of putting it. What it comes down to is there's been a lot of controversy, obviously, about September 23rd, and now we got a blitz of people saying, just coming up with anything they can come up with. Some of that, believe it or not, is as paranoid as it sounds. Some of that is what we call shills and trolls, and those are people that are actually put out there to discredit some of the actual data. And I'm not paranoid. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. I gotta go outside for a minute, get this black helicopter off my lawn. But seriously, the bottom line is one of the latest blurbs that's come out. It's kind of the latest vogue, and it's just weird. Somebody will get on there and say something without any data, without any proof, and it'll go viral. And people are so stupid, I'm sorry, but the average person is so illiterate when it comes to any of this kind of stuff, data and so on, that they'll buy it hook, line, and sinker. They don't do any homework. They want somebody to hand them all the information, and they consider it gospel. It's amazing. And so really what I want to address is the fact that there's some people out there that some time ago could not reconcile the word in Revelation, that they couldn't reconcile it. They couldn't figure out why they weren't seeing some fiery dragon. There's been all the talk about the front end of that prophecy, but the second part of that prophecy says that there is a fiery red dragon, and is going to, that fiery red dragon is going to try and devour the child as soon as it is born. And anyway, so God uses the natural to accomplish many of his goals and the prophecies and stuff. He always has. And you look back at some of the stuff, again, before I go any further, the best way to say this is go to Gil Broussard, that's Broussard, and a good place to go. I used to send people over to the site, which is planet7x.net, but that is a little bit commercial. There's a young producer who kind of put his logo on it and pushed it from there. And nothing against that. I mean, Gil's got to finance what he's doing, but that wasn't Gil doing that. That was somebody else doing that. And, excuse me, I'm sitting here having too much pizza with too much cheese and too much garlic. And, of course, all three of those are oxymorons. And speaking of morons, no, I'm playing. That's not nice. I'm not calling it morons. People have to conjecture if they have to conjecture. And the bottom line is this: there's a new thing out there. I watched one guy. He was convinced that he'd found some real data, not realizing that data is based on not only the observed data, but the math, physics, Kepler's laws of planetary motion, the actual laws of physics and math applied to something like this. And people don't realize that because our society has become so secular and so buried under all kinds of humanism, secularism, relativism, communism, all the isms, moronism. Anyway, we lose sight of the fact that, this stuff is either math, and the proof is either in the pudding, or it's not, and there's no sense in conjecturing, making a bunch of crap up to make yourself look smart. Well, somebody might say, well, isn't that what you're doing? Because here I am doing this stuff. And the fact is, I'm dragging my knuckles into the 21st century. I did a little bit of homework, and that's about it. I think PhD stands for post-hole digger. Look at our education system. Really? So, like Paul Begley says, are you serious? Are you serious? But, so, what it is somebody a long time ago, not a long time ago, several years ago, a young man and then some others got on that bandwagon, decided that he had found that Saturn, because it's in at least some semblance of proximity at that time, Saturn is the fiery red dragon, and that's a crock. A crock of, it's a crock. Well, and NASA's would like you to believe that as well, as the other powers that be. They would love for you to buy that, and because they actually blocked the thing, and I'm going to show you proof that this thing was blocked. And now there's a blitz out there on YouTube of people saying, well, no, that fiery dragon that was blocked by Google Sky and other, I think Sky Watch, I'm not sure what it's called, but all the other actual astronomical and IR, that is infrared monitoring telescopes, anywhere there was a recording of what was out there in the infrared, they blocked it. All of a sudden there's this big black square. I'll show you that in just a moment. And the young man I mentioned and many others that got on that bandwagon are saying, took it from there and are saying that fiery red dragon was Saturn. Well, that's so ridiculous because let's face it, what he did is he conjectured because of the proximity of some of the other constellations. You just below that, the feet of Virgo, there is a serpent, the constellation of the serpent. Well, it doesn't say serpent, it says a fiery red dragon, and the serpent, if you know that constellation, is not fiery red. There's no iron oxide in it, and that is a prerequisite, by the way. It is the iron oxide that accompanies that which is known as P7X or Planet X or Nibiru. Again, so many names on that thing. And the iron oxide is like a dust that accompanies the whole thing because it's a giant rusty wrecking ball that's so magnetic that everywhere it goes, and this elongated orbit that it has it draws in more debris. It has a debris trail that's a couple million miles long. It's huge, and it's been documented for years. It's just that the mainstream doesn't want the public to know, and again, because they'll panic, they're afraid they'll panic, and the banking system will go down, and so on. Now, the rest of that prophecy, it says, so it's not fiery red. It can't be Saturn. Saturn is not fiery red. And it doesn't have a 2 million mile debris trail with asteroids and moons and planets and subplanets, or whatever you want to call them, meteors. This thing is just a disaster about to happen. I was going to say waiting to happen, but it's about to happen. And it's part of the prophecy. So, and you get the point. But also remember that it says in the prophecy that fiery red dragon draws a third of the stars and casts them to the earth. Well, it's good to remember that those are all action verbs. You cannot be stationary and do any of that. And the constellation of the serpent is a constellation. It's it's stationary, it's not moving. On the other hand, the P7X or PX or Nibiru, Hercules, there's so many names, that solar system, mini solar system that's come in to our solar system and brought all this junk with it, does exactly that, and that's part of the prophecy also. Now, as I always do, the best place, in my opinion, to get true data, corroborated, redundantly confirmed data, both historically and in the stellar and planetary records, historical records all the way back nearly to the antediluvian period. Go to Gil Broussard, any of the interviews that he did. The best interview that I could suggest, because some of the interviewers, the hosts, are busy trying to get their little logo and their little agenda, so they really get in the way of just letting Gil share what he found. And the best interview I've found is if you go to the channel Caravan to Midnight and go to the very first interview that John B. Wells, that's the host, did with Gil Broussard. It'll blow your mind. I mean, it's data upon data, and it's repeatable models. That means, like he says, if you bring your data into the lab and it's repeatable and you get a confirmation and the model works repeatedly, that is science. So, and that's how you corroborate or validate, authenticate anything. So check out Gil Broussard, I think I shared it earlier, Broussard, for data. I mean, it's astonishing, and you'll really love it. Now, coming back to the clip I promised I'd share, here it is. And in the top left corner, you'll see what looks like a cartoon character or whatever. That is an actual, well, it says there, it's kind of blurred on this particular graphic, but it's an infrared picture of that group that has come in. This is what they call Nibiru or Planet 7X, or Nemesis, many names. The little dragon head to the right is kind of a nonsensical, artist's rendition. I don't know why that's even there. It's kind of a dumb thing. But so this is what's called the fiery dragon, the red dragon in Revelation, off to the top left corner. Again, that's an actual infrared picture. So this system has come in. The line along the bottom and some of the stuff behind, that dust, that cloud, the debris, that's why the ancients called it that, the fiery red dragon. I mean, you look at the oldest secular records, stellar and astronomy records, and they're very accurate, very analytical by the Chinese. And you'll find that's why their art to this day is filled with red dragons all the time, if you ever notice that. They were the first ones to spot it coming back in, all the way back just after the flood. And the reason you can only see it in infrared is because it doesn't come into our light spectrum. Our retina doesn't process something like that. We have to have a different energy, a different filter, that is, to be able to see the thing. Simultaneously, and this has also been validated by many channels and researchers, but it's the mainstream just poo-poos it, and that is that it is being obfuscated. They've used high tech to keep people from seeing it. Well, in some cases, their technology was late, so they had to get blatant in trying to hide the thing. And what you're looking at right now on this clip is a perfect example. And the point of this apologetic, not only are these people out here saying that Saturn or some constellation equals the fiery red dragon because they can't figure out, what else it could possibly be, so they just use proximity. In the same way that is incorrect, it is incorrect to say that it is anything other than what it, you're looking at right here. Now, if you zoom this, I'll try and find that other picture. This is the actual infrared picture you were seeing, not blown up. And when you go to Google Sky, or you go to, I don't know if it's still there, but a lot of times when ISS, forgets to shut off the camera and something goes by, a planetary body or a UFO of some kind, I'm not going to get into that, but they'll cut the feed. And you go and you look at some of this data and it's just gone. You say, oh, that something happened with the camera and that hour of information just disappeared. We don't know. That's what they do. That's why they call it NASA. NASA stands for, NASA is never a straight answer. Well, and here is a zoomed representation of that picture. This is that same picture. Now, when I have a feeling, personally, I mean, this is just my opinion, that somebody at NASA and or Google Sky, or, because the other day, it's ironic, when this new report came out, 2 days before that, I had put out a blurb that it's obvious now that Google and the powers that be, NASA and the other, what the Bible in the ancient Greek calls the cosmokratopos, which is a giant Greek word for, the rulers of darkness in high places. In Ephesians, they're in bed together, and they're working hard to suppress this as long as they possibly can, to force their agenda and to use it to set up what they want to do. And that's a whole nother subject. But so this is really happening. That's what's amazing. It's like out of some kind of movie, but it's really happening right in front of us. And most people just, have cranial rectilitis. They can't put it together. So, and what I was going to say is my opinion is that somebody at Google Sky didn't, or at, one of the higher organizations that was told to redact this, that is, obscure it, just couldn't bring themselves to not leave a little hint for the public. In other words, their integrity. I mean, this is high-tech, smart people. They left part of that showing, and I think that was intentional by the actual editor, who didn't like blocking it from the public. But again, that obviously is a big conjecture on my part. And I just thought I'd throw that in because, they could have covered it unless they were in a hurry, or the editing had a glitch, of course. If it did have a glitch, it's probably a divine intervention, because obviously he wants us to see the sign, or he wouldn't have mentioned the sign. It was the Lord himself, that prophesied that we should watch for the signs. And he gave us many examples in his teachings. Jesus said, watch for these things. And that's good enough for me. I don't know about you, but I don't want to get out of my weight class, you know what I mean, as they say in the ring. Or I guess it's in the cage now. You have a choice. You can fight in the ring or you can fight in the cage. Either way, it's beyond me and beyond us. So, when all else fails, read the instructions, right? So coming back to, if you look at the top left corner of this graphic again, get an idea. Cover with your hand or finger, half the left side of that thing where they blocked it, and you come back over and compare the two pictures with the one that's blocked and this one. It's unmistakable, undeniable that it is one and the same. And this particular shot was obviously captured before they didactic, before they obfuscated. That is, hidden. They hid it, tried to hide it. So this is hard proof, and there's even better proof. You go to WSO Steve Olson, who I often endorse, and try and get people to go over there and look at some of his data. He has observable data. That's way good. people send him observations and pictures and data from everything from the space station to their backyard and everything in between. And he gets to go through that stuff and then handles it really well because he knows what he's doing, and he knows how to use the forensic, Photoshop stuff and to prove if it's a real shot or if it's been doctored up or messed with in Photoshop or anywhere else. So WSO Steve Olson, check it out, but he does a really excellent comparison. But if you compare this happy face with the other shot, it's unmistakable, really. So there it is. I mean, the proof is there, and there is obfuscation. This is not the first time or object that I personally have seen. I've actually seen a lot of obfuscation, a lot of attempts to hide certain things from the public that are going on in the solar system, especially on our sun. That's another video. We'll get into that another time. But it's important to realize that this is being done, and bending light, laser obfuscation, frontal light that between an object, like when somebody puts a flashlight in your eyes at night and approaches you, you have no idea who's approaching you or what is going on because all you can see is the light. That's how they do it, and that's one of the old school's ways they do it. I think it's a multi-faceted, high-tech obfuscation unit they're using, as well as light simulation. And as crazy as that sounds, you go to any of these other more scientific channels and they'll even talk to you about things like the Fresnel lens, and they've had laser light and light bending technology for decades, so it's not that big of a deal. And since even our atmosphere becomes a fisheye lens, so that it magnifies the size of the sun and the moon, they're not that big in our sky. If we had a straight lens, you'd see a little dot out in space. But our atmosphere makes it magnifies them, makes them look closer to us. The same principle can be applied the opposite direction, and we won't get into that. That's also another video. Here's another way of stating it. I brought this up in my last video. It's really hard evidence, quite plainly. What you're looking at here is one of our satellite composite. It's actually a picture, like a radar picture, if you will, but it's real. It's not just blips. Those are objects, but you're seeing them out in space through a proton filter. Sometimes they use electron filters and ion filters, and I'm not that astute, as I said before, on some of that. But this is obviously not a light spectrum type of photograph, if you will. Allow me that photograph. It's a composite, what they call a composite. But anyway, so you're actually seeing the energy coming off of the sun off to the left there, like the big CME, and that's what you're looking at. The day of the big CME, it lit up an object off to the far right. You see that circular object off to the far right, and the little blip, half white, half black in the middle with between the two is one of the planets. I believe that's Earth, and it could be Venus, but I believe it's Earth. And then in this particular case, you have this enormous object off to the far right, and we can't see it in the light spectrum. We can see it in infrared, as you just saw earlier, but in the ion and proton filters, when there's enough energy, it gets lit up, and that's what you're looking at. When we had that CME, all of a sudden somebody dropped the ball, because now here we're looking at the thing. That thing off to the far right is the object. That's Nemesis, if you will. That's Nibiru. That's P7X. It's the real deal, and it's coming through, and it's moving so fast, people can't figure out how to nail it down. And the moons and asteroids and debris in its back trail is so busy, it's messing up our magnetosphere, as I showed in the prior video. You can go back and look at the explanation on the magnetosphere. We're in trouble, folks. We're getting pounded really hard from every direction, and this is just starters. You know, buckle up, folks. It's going to get real interesting. I'd like to qualify something. Actually, I need to apologize. I misspoke just now. I made a blanket statement that's pretty irresponsible. In my zeal, I wasn't really thinking it through when I said that the object in that proton capture, that picture, that is, when the CME illuminated in the proton spectrum, that object on the last clip, I said that was Nemesis, that was Nibiru, that was P7X, whatever you want to call it. And that's not responsible of me. I don't like it when other people do that, so I caught myself. What it comes down to is that particular, you know, what they call Nibiru, they call Planet X, or the Destroyer. It's got so many names. Herberculus. It goes on and on. There's about 30 names for this thing, but it is actually like a mini solar system. It has asteroids and meteors and you know, moons, and it's just busy. And it's got, like I said, a 2 million mile tail of magnetic iron oxide dust and debris behind it. So, but I wanted to qualify that. That could be one of the moons. It could be any number of things. And the reason they're getting so many captures of this thing on so many of the weather cameras and the satellite cameras is because the movement of the entourage, if you will, that's with it is it's sizable, and there's obviously a lot of objects that could come into view. As you can probably recognize, this is the exact same capture of the quote-unquote dragon that everybody believes is that planet and its entourage coming in. There's so much data on that. Again, if you go to Gil Broussard, he can bring you up to date. He won't admit there's a visual, because that's the way he approaches this thing. He wants it to be scaring the entire world before he endorses a picture, which is wise. But anyway, what you're looking at is the original picture in 1983. Steve Olson brought this up. He's really good. I know I keep touting those two guys, but they're just really thorough, really amazing how well they both handle all of this data. And Steve pointed out, with his great research, he pointed out that this particular entourage, this solar system, whatever you want to call it, moved from Leo down to Virgo to be part of the issue in the first place. And in order for it to be in position right there below the feet of Virgo to devour, quote unquote, devour the child and be part of the prophecy, it had to move a long distance and rapidly. And that's consistent with the other data too, but I don't have time for that. The point is, this was 1983, and now it went from Leo to Virgo to be in that perfect position. If it was a constellation, and people call it a constellation, or they just make up stuff. It's amazing in order to justify themselves. They don't want to believe what's happening or whatever. For whatever reason, they won't look at the data, and the point is, this thing moved. So it's not a constellation. A constellation is stationary. Not only that, but even if it was one item with debris, not a mini solar system, the same is still true. It's mobile, very mobile. And so this shoots all this stuff about it being Saturn, and it's just ridiculous. The things that people, they conjecture rather than to look at the math and physics and Kepler's laws of planetary motion and so on. Here you have, back to the other picture in IR, you have that position. You see the arrow, it has moved over there to be in perfect position. And then also, when you go back and compare at a zoom, whether a medium zoom or closer, you see that that is the item they were trying to obscure and hide. So there's your evidence, right there. So the bottom line here is, why is all this taking place? Why did Jesus Christ say that we should watch for these signs, and that he gave us great detail in Matthew of what it would look like, and all those things are happening verbatim. So he's the one that said that we should be watching for this, and that's pretty important. It's a lot like military. You hate your sergeant when you're in the States because they're always yelling and being, like they act like bullies. But when you're in combat, that boy knows how to stay alive. You're going to be clinging to every word he has to say because he's been there several times and made it. So all of a sudden you're listening. It's a good idea. And as many know that have read the instruction manual, God said in the beginning, when he was creating all this, he said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. So signs are important. He had this whole thing programmed, set up, and he's trying to let people know. That's what this is about. He's just trying to let people know what's coming. And it's not just people who don't know the Lord Jesus Christ that could be in trouble. At one point he says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. He didn't say people who were mocking and spitting on the blood that he spilt to save us. He said my people, and so there's a lot of people in the church that are playing games, and that's a whole nother video too. And anyway, so you get the point. He loves you, and he's just coming after you. He's been chasing you your whole life, and most folks know it. They're just cough and turn their head, shuffle, and walk off. How about those Titans or those Giants? And hey, did you see the game the other night? Change the subject quick. Anyway, he's crazy about you. Check it out. Read the instructions. And until next time, just hang out with the King. Get in his face. He likes it. It's not, you don't have to do something religious and jump through some religious hoops or something. It's just about you and him. Always was. When you're dying, and you're about to kick out, you'll be talking. You'll be going, well, at least I should maybe try and check in. No atheists in a foxhole, as they say. God bless you, and until next time, take care now. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. By trade, I am a recording artist, have been for decades and a very long time. And if you like blues, right where it meets rock and roll and some gospel here and there, and P&W and R&B, and over the years I've done just about every genre you can do, and I write that way too. Done everything from the White House to the ghetto and everything in between over the decades. And so just go over there. There's a series of singles up right now, but also different albums and projects I've done over the decades. And so for now, thanks, and keep your radar up. More to come. And God bless you. Take care now.